everybody, and welcome back to episode 2 of Fat Man Food Reviews. Please, if you have any suggestions for a new name, feel free to throw them down there. And today we're going to keep on the apple kick. We've got a delicious Fuji apple and a curious jazz apple. I never had a jazz apple before, never actually heard of a jazz apple before. Everybody's heard of a Fuji apple. I very rarely eat Fuji apples. I've only, when I grew up, it was mostly Red Delicious, things along those lines. It was nice to branch out and try something a little new. Same goes with the jazz apples. With the jazz apples, they're very similar to a kind of poor man's Honey Crisp. They're not as sweet, they're not as big, but they have that similar texture and feel as a Honey Crisp. All right, so let's get started. First up, we have the jazz apple. As you can see, it's a nice, small, firm apple, good shape. It's a little bit more oblong, more oval-esque than the typical apple shape you expect. But let's break right into it. The first thing you notice right off the first bite is that it is very crunchy. It's a little more dense than a Honey Crisp and not as sweet, but it has that same sort of crisp breakaway when you sink your teeth into it. The only real complaint I have is that it's not particularly sweet and it's not particularly flavorful. I don't want to say it's bland, but it seems like you taste more of the skin than you do the flesh of the apple. Let's break in for another bite. But very similar to the Honey Crisp in that it is an apple that wants to be eaten, very easily eaten. Even though it is denser, a little bit harder than the Honey Crisp, it's not so hard you're worrying about, oh shit, am I going to break a tooth off? Oh, blah, 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 blah. So you're able to kind of just relax and go at it. Yes, I would have to say, purely flavor wise, out of the, at this moment, 3 apples we've tested, I would have to say flavor wise, this is the lowest ranked. I won't go so far as to say it's the worst, but it definitely doesn't have that sweetness and flavor that a lot of other apples of the same cost and variety do. And unlike the Honey Crisp, it's at half the price, maybe $3 and some change for a 3-pound bag, whereas Honey Crisp are about $7. If you're just looking to eat an apple, this isn't a bad way to go. And there we have the end of the jazz apple, as I'm sure you can see. Again, light, airy, crispy, a little denser than what you would expect from like a Honey Crisp. Not extremely flavorful. Not a lot of sweetness, not a lot of bitterness, tartness. The most flavor you really get seems to come from the skin as you eat it. Unfortunately, I could see these apples, if you don't eat them quickly, becoming very like milly and sandy. Like the flesh I could see degrading over time. Like it doesn't seem like it holds up as well as certain other apple varieties do. And now the Fuji apples. Fuji apples are much shorter. They're not nearly as tall and long, but as I'm sure you can see, they are short and fat. It's got a nice girthiness to it, a good little bit of meat. Honestly, it looks about like, I don't want to say 2 times the apple, but it's easily 1.5 times the meat on this bad boy. So let's crack straight into it. I would say the Fiji, however you want to pronounce it, Mount Fuji. I would say the Fuji apples, they're just a step up in the density. They're still crisp. There's still some light and airiness there, but you can tell it's a much sturdier apple. Not only is it hardier, it seems as though it would last longer and hold up better. Whereas the previous Jazz apples seemed like they could become a little sandy or milly if you didn't eat them quick enough. And the Fujis, they have a very distinct flavor from any of the other apples we've reviewed. It's not sweet, it's not bitter, but it's more of like a leafy herb type of essence to it that isn't too long lived. It has that taste, it drops off, and then it picks back up when you start eating the peel. So the peel itself has its own distinct taste and flavor as well. This apple is, I would have to say, noticeably juicier. As you're biting it, you can literally see drops of the juice form. Whereas with a Jazz apple, it's just a straight eat and go, no problem. Now this could mean if you're trying to eat apples on the go, want it as a quick snack, that may be more up your alley if you're not looking for something you need a napkin to eat. It's not as crisp and snappy as the other apples we've tried. The second you pop your teeth into the apple, it seems like the flesh just cracks and comes right off. So there's not a lot of work when eating the apple. But there is much more depth and complexity to the flavor of a Fuji than that of a Jazz apple. Yes, I do enjoy, again, although it's not a sweetness or a bitterness that you would typically expect, I do enjoy the very aromatic flavor that comes with the Fuji over a Jazz apple. And that, my friends, is the Fuji apple, which you literally can't see. And that, my friends, is the Fuji apple. Delicious. Very good. Two extremely different apples. Very different apples. Two very different and very delicious apples, I have to say. The Jazz apple seems more like the quick on the go snack you want to just put in your pocket. Take a few bites off of it. You can sit on your desk. You don't have to worry about it dripping here or there. The only issue I've noticed with the Jazz apples, just the shelf life doesn't seem to last as long as your typical apple would. I don't know if that comes from the petiteness of the apple, the airiness of the apple. However, Honeycrisp, which are probably the most similar physically that we've tried, not necessarily flavor wise, but they seem to last much longer and hold up much better than Jazz apples. I'm not for sure if Jazz apples are some sort of weird hybrid. With the Fuji apple, it's a much denser, as we saw, apple. It's a lot smaller and shorter and compact, I should say. Much girthier. Both of which are similarly priced. You can get about a 3-pound bag in the United States for about $3.50 to $4 if it's with inflation. But overall, I would have to recommend the Fuji apple. I mean, obviously I like Japanese art, etc. I'm a fan of anime and whatnot, but just hands down, the Japanese have it here. I'm still not gonna rank the Fuji very highly because to some people that almost earthy, aromatic, leafy, plant-like flavor might be off-putting. Whereas anybody who eats a Honeycrisp is probably gonna like a Honeycrisp. I don't see many people having an issue with it. Even if you're not a big apple eater, you'd most likely like a Honeycrisp. But the Fuji wins between the Jazz Apple and the Fuji. The complexity of the flavor, the size of the apple, the durability and the life shelf of the apple, all of which to me are what give the Fuji the just the neck above, just the head above everybody else in this area. I would love to get a few recommendations because we're running out of apples here, folks. So please feel free to throw something down in the comments you would like to see my big old booty eat behind a silhouette. I'd like to keep making these. It's not too hard. It's not too complex. It allows me to get on camera a little more, to kind of get used to a different style of editing. And I greatly appreciate anybody who's watched the first one and now the second one. And hopefully we'll see you on the third. Take it easy. That's all for this Fat Man Food Review.